Hello, everyone. It's so good to see you again. There's a crispness in the air today, and sometimes we forget to focus on today because there's so many things going on. You start thinking about tomorrow, and when you get to this time of year, we're almost into autumn. Sometimes there are a lot of people who are already thinking about 2024, and there's a lot of people who are already focused on the next season, which is mere hours away at this point. But today, I think I want us to focus a little bit on this very day. The Bible tells us do not worry about tomorrow. So let's think about today, this very day. What are you thankful for today? What's like got your attention? Um, Unlike other people, maybe even in your family or people that you know well, you may be facing a challenge that seems so big that it's hard to ignore, and worse yet, it's hard not to worry. David, as a little boy, as a shepherd, encountered such a challenge. And of course, we know he faced Goliath. And Goliath was this towering giant, armed, had his full army behind him. And David was kind of this youngest child who was merely kind of working at that point as a delivery boy and a messenger between his dad and his three older brothers, because they were, of course, in Israel's army. And Goliath had been challenging that army day and night for 40 days. And he wanted a battle, he wanted a fight with someone, but every soldier was afraid. This story is familiar to many of us, but the lessons that it holds is probably what we need to take hold of this very day. Today, don't worry about tomorrow. There are lessons in the story of young David facing a very mature and tactical giant that we can use today, this very day, no matter what circumstance we're facing. And the first strategy is perception. The soldiers saw Goliath as merely taunting a nation, but David saw the taunting as an insult against God. That was his motivation. The right perception is one of the most important strategies we can have when it comes to battles. So, one of the things we can ask ourselves today is how are we looking at the challenge that we face? Are we seeing it merely as, just something against ourselves, our family, our nation? Or can we see the bigger picture as a direct challenge against God and have our motivation spring from the bigger kingdom perspective? The right perspective will set you up for the second strategy. And that strategy is patterns. David had to get past the opinions of his oldest brother. His brother belittled him, called him names, painted him as this unfit, lazy kid. And this prejudice was a pattern of mistreatment that David had to ignore this time around in order to face the present challenge. Even when belittled by his own brother, he didn't just shrivel up and say, okay, I'm going back home. He had to choose to change how he responded to that pattern in his life, how his brother had treated him up to that point and how he had responded up to that point. So are you ready? Are we ready to change a pattern, to respond differently to prejudices, even facts, opinions, in order to face this challenge? Then the third strategy becomes clearer, right? And that's persistence. Even when his brothers ignored him, David kept asking about this battle. He persisted until word got to the king. He persisted until word got to the king. David could have given up when family, familiar voices, even someone in authority, his elder brothers, they weren't authority, his father. When David faced that resistance, instead of just, going back or giving up, he kept persisting until he reached the right source and the right authority. That was the king himself. How about you? Maybe you've been rejected at every turn by family, by friends, familiar connections, people you thought, okay, I will trust them to give me an answer to help me, but they all rejected you. So are you willing to keep persisting, to take on this challenge that you're looking at this very day? Then you are in the right posture, which brings us to the fourth strategy, posture. David could not match Goliath's military training or support or physical maturity and stature. That was just not, it was just not going to work. But David took on a humble posture. He took on the posture of a servant, willing to serve God, willing to serve the king. And in doing so, he simply believed God would rescue him. God would rescue the nation. See, David did not posture himself as king, because we knew he would be king, or as anointed. We knew he was anointed to win this particular battle. When he faced Goliath that very day, he chose the posture of his current season, right? Which was servant. He was a shepherd boy. And a time to do battle as king would come later in his life, as we well know. But the challenge of the present moment, the challenge of that day required an as is win. Do you need an as is win today? You see, God would give him a victory, not based on his future, but as he was in the present, so it would be clear that it was God in this battle. It's very important that we posture ourselves not as something in the future. We know God has the future set, but trust that God can give us this as is win. Use us as is for a victory for this very day. Okay, so are you prepared to have the right posture that will help you prevail as is in the present against this challenge? Then you are truly ready for the fifth and most important strategy. Very important. This is the final one that I'm going to talk about today. You are ready to prevail. You're ready to prevail. David knew that not even the king's armor could protect him if God was not giving him victory. He was able to say, the battle is the Lord's. You know, sometimes we say that, but in our heart, we're like, God, I'm going to fight this thing. Like it's me, myself, and I'm the army. But the battle is the Lord's. What does that mean? Because he was trusting God to prevail. No matter what other strategies we have, no matter what other strategies, our perception could be right, our patterns could be in the right direction, our persistence could be in point, our posture could be, but if we don't have that prevailing mindset that it is God who is going to give the victory, then we will not prevail, right? Unless we surrender the battle to God. And when we surrender the battle to God, that's not some passive thing. That's true faith, because what's happening in that moment is we're saying we trust God's presence, we trust his power, we trust his promises, and we trust his plans. We're not cherry picking, okay, I'm going to trust him here, I'm not trusting there. We're saying, God, I surrender this battle to you. I'm surrendering to you, and trust that God will prevail and he will use us to do it. So do you believe that the challenge you are facing this very day belongs to the Lord? Then I truly believe that from kind of this valley that you're in, that between that rock, that hard place where you can't really see your way out, you can actually declare this very day that your perception is by faith. You're going to see by the Spirit and move by the Spirit, be motivated by the Spirit. That your pattern is by faith. You're not going back to old patterns. Things that used to bother you before, things that used to turn you around and upside down, that's not going to stop you regarding this very day. Your persistence is by faith. Just because you got a no here or a no there, or somebody who's known you since you were a kid is saying things that's kind of bringing up doubt, you're going to persist by faith. You won't quit because you face that resistance. Your posture will be by faith. But you have to understand, yes, there are future plans and God has that in hand, but God wants to give you an as is victory right in the circumstance that you face right now. He's going to use you as is, as is. And then your prevailing will be by faith. You will trust God to use you in his battle, because truly the battle belongs to him. You're part of his army and he will use you, but the battle is his. So this very day, declare that the battle is the Lord's. This very day, declare that the victory is over your enemy. This very day, declare that you have the spoils of the war. You have the spoils of your enemy. This very day, you have victory. Before you see it, declare it. I want you to be strong. I want you to be courageous. And I will see you at the victory line. God bless you.